Welcome to On Target Radio, Segment 6, where just because the show ends doesn't mean the conversation stops. Now here's your hosts, David Lombardo and Gretchen Fritz.
So there was really not a lot of time to cover all the subjects that you wanted to cover. And one of the things that you felt fairly strongly about is why is it that some states have opt-out laws and Illinois isn't one of them? Is that right?
That's correct. This is one of the objections that is often brought up that, well, we can't have an opt-out law because then we might lose federal funding because we'll cause too many people to opt out. That simply is unfounded. There are already several states that have opt-out laws, among them California, Oregon, Wisconsin, Utah, Nebraska, and Pennsylvania. They've suffered no adverse consequences and they've suffered no federal funding cuts. So that's just completely unfounded. And we already have opt-out rights as parents anyway. In Illinois, we can opt our kids out of state-mandated vaccines. We can opt them out of what we perceive as controversial curriculum, certain graduation requirements. So opt-out is nothing new.
You can homeschool.
Exactly.
Right.
Opt out of the whole thing.
This is nothing new, and it already exists in many other states when it comes to the standardized testing. So,
The thing that I find interesting about this is if this is such a great deal, how do we explain the fact that every year more and more students are opting out of it? The curve is not going in favor of the test. People are running away from it like a building on fire.
yeah, and you see that in the state of New York. One of the things that has come up is the fact that kids were reacting very negatively to these tests, physically as well as psychologically, not wanting to go to school, losing their love of learning, having physical problems like losing control of their bowel functions and things like that. I mean, just breaking down when it comes to this testing. There was actually a doctor, I believe she was a clinical psychologist, who gave testimony to this effect, that her practice saw an uptick in the number of referrals after this testing came on board in New York, and it's only gotten worse. So there are some really serious consequences that hopefully we won't be facing. Hopefully we can learn from states like New York and put an end to it.
I can't remember what state it was, but we talked about this during the break. The superintendent in one county said, you will take the test or you will be suspended. And he was like very in your face about it. And they had an interview with him on the radio, and the interviewer was trying to give the guy a little wiggle room so he didn't sound so psychotic about it. And the guy was having nothing to do with that at all. He's going, no, if they don't take the test, they're suspended from school. It was like incredulous. So then the interviewer goes, how do you explain the fact that the next county over, they can decide whether or not they want to take it? And he goes, that's just poor judgment. I've never heard an interview so arrogant before. I mean, you'd think it was like somebody from the White House saying that.
Financial motivation. That's probably what it was.
And this is the problem when you don't have an opt-out law. There are no clear and concise policies and procedures for what happens when a child exercises their legal right to refuse to take these tests. So they're just making up the law as it goes along. And the kids are the ones that are in the middle. They are suffering because of this. There are kids who are made as young as 8 years old who are made to sit and stare and do absolutely nothing while the testing is going on if they have refused to take this test. This happens right here in Illinois. They're not allowed to read, write, or draw. There was actually a case, and the Tribune has an article about this, a kid who had ADD who was made to sit and stare during this testing, and he was given additional time as an accommodation because he had ADD. His teacher forced him to sit there for an additional 80 minutes of his accommodation time to punish him because he refused to take the test. This is the type of abuse that's happening because of this. And this is why we are calling on our state legislatures, we're calling on the governor to support parental rights so that we can protect our kids from this. It's abuse. There's no other way to put it. It's child abuse. And you know what's ironic about it is that everybody in the school building is a mandated reporter of child abuse. They're abusing kids.
They're committing it.
This is the insanity that Common Core and then this testing has put us in.
I remember, it was I think a couple of months ago, we talked about there is a federal move to make homeschooling illegal. Remember?
We didn't get to that.
We didn't
story.
do it on the air, but we talked about it. That there are a group of people in the federal government who want your right as a parent to teach your own kid to become illegal, forcing you to go to school. And I'm thinking, boy, is that stupid. Now, today, I read a thing about one of the women's colleges, well-known ones, I can't remember which one it is, but one of the sort of East Coasted kind of women's colleges, a conservative woman. Did you read this?
No.
A conservative woman was going to speak on campus, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And these girls went psycho. They demanded to have trigger words, and they demanded to have safe havens where they could go during the talk. Like this woman was going to come in with an AK-47 and shoot at the campus, simply because she was a conservative. What kind of insane overreaction is that? And the bigger thing is, what are these people going to do if they ever graduate from college? How are they going to possibly be prepared to go out in the world with that kind of an attitude?
You know, the lady who called in, who said that they're making the test harder because she believes that the state and the federal government want more control. I know as an educator, they're trying to make the test more difficult to see if the children can increase their capabilities. You know, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I really do, because there's a lot of stress involved here. And that was my point about if you take the United States as one, just like with the BAC, you can't be .10 here in this state and be drunk, and only be .05 and be drunk over here. There has to be some cohesiveness and agreement.
I think you're right. I have a hard time when anyone comes in from out of state, even out of district, because I think the needs in a rural district, if you're in southern Illinois, it's all farmland. These kids, they're farm families. You know, they've got a different lifestyle and a different set of expectations. And you juxtapose on that the need that you have to learn what people in Manhattan are learning. I get the fact that we're a global economy, and I get the fact that you have to live in that world, but the fact is all politics is local. That's the truth. All politics is local. And people in southern Illinois and rural areas don't want to hear that stuff. If the kid can read and write, and you know what I'm saying, and add and subtract, if he can do basic stuff, that's fine. But all the rest of the stuff, it's just getting out of hand.
And the problem with standardized tests is they provide one very narrow snapshot.
Small slice of a pie.
Yeah, of a child's
Sure.
learning. And they can't measure a lot of things that make us intelligent. Our creativity, our ability to collaborate, and all those types of things. So it's to me, it's beyond ridiculous to try and put kids in this little box here. And we're going to evaluate you based on this, and then this will follow you all throughout your career. When it doesn't measure most of what makes you a human being. To me, this is an assault on our humanity. It's an assault on the humanity of children.
Well, that's what
I
said
do
that.
agree too with what Mary said. She got me thinking because there's been a debate. I'm in local government, and there's been this idea that's been floated in Illinois that they want to consolidate local units of local government. They're like, oh, we have so many thousands of units of local government, and they're trying to say that's a bad thing. And I've actually heard some Republicans, shockingly enough, say, yeah, that's a bad thing. We should consolidate local governments. And I say no. Because I've been in now 2 different units of local government, and I have friends who are in other units of local government, whether it's village board, school board, park district board.
Township.
Yeah, fire districts. We need local control. And it's exactly what you were saying of, you know, these people live in this community. They know what this community needs and what this community wants, and they can do things, they can make decisions based on the standards of the community. And nowhere is that more relevant than in school districts.
But I have a question for you guys. What happens to a kid, you use any area, okay, the child can function in that community. What happens if that child wants to leave that community and go to another community and try to make themselves more
Fit in.
marketable. Yeah, or
But here's the thing.
But do you really think that that standardizing curriculum is gonna accomplish that? I don't really think it
Exactly,
does.
exactly, you're right. That's exactly it. I think it's fair to say that there are certain things that all students have to learn. You gotta learn to read, gotta learn to write, gotta learn to do basic math, okay? To this day, never have I used calculus. Despite what they said, never have I woken up and gone, oh my God, thank God I know calculus. It's never happened, okay? So you're absolutely right. It's tied, and it is tied to federal money. Schools start getting dollars from the federal government, and there's always a price you pay for that. Always. You're using their textbook, using their stuff, and they're indoctrinating students. My attitude is 3 hours. You know what? Let me tell you. A really young guy, a young teenage kid, once, said I was an old fogey, and this was like 10 years ago. But, you old guys, what have you done? We've done this, we've done that, we've done this, we've done that. And I said, I'll tell you exactly what we did. We invented everything you use to do what you say you're doing. Had we not done that, you wouldn't be talking the way you are. And we did it learning reading, writing, and arithmetic. We went to school, learned the basic stuff, and you know what? If you wanted to go someplace in Manhattan, you learn to fit in. You listen to people. My parents came here, my dad spoke no English. He was 12 years old, and he ended up working, I've said the story many times, but he ended up, because they had no money, working through elementary school, high school, college, and medical school, while learning to speak the language. Come on. Is it tough? Yes, but that's how you survive. This one curriculum fits all thing?
did your dad like testing?
No.
He became a doctor?
Yeah.
Nice.
And the interesting thing is, before he died, he confided, this totally blew me away. He confided me, he said, I never wanted to be a doctor. I go, what? That's all I ever knew him as, right? He said, I want to be a barber. I go, how did you become a doctor? Well, he came from a big family, and the 3 youngest boys had no occupation. The older brothers did, right? And when they came to this country, my grandfather lined up the 3 youngest boys and said, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a dentist. That was it. 12 years old.
They had no, well, they were from the old country. They had no
Exactly.
say. You
So-
did what your parents told you to do.
And they did it. Millions of immigrants came to this country speaking not a word of the language, and very frequently, like my dad talked about signs that said no Dagos, no Wops, that kind of stuff. The Irish did. I mean, you know that. African Americans have had that all along. And they overcome it. They don't let it stop them.
Even not even talking about racial, but I mean, like my family, there's a large chunk of my family, and I'm not trying to dog anybody, but it is my family, and I can say this: they're white trash. And
Well, that's nice.
we grew up with, I mean, they had no culture at all, just no couth, no culture. And I got to a point, I was only in grade school, and I realized, I'm like, either I can go this way or I can go this way. You know, my family, it's like I can go the white trash way and be like these uncouth people, or I can, you know, we lived in Plainfield, I'm like, I can be more like these people. I have a choice. I was probably only 8 or 9, you know, I probably wasn't very old when I said to myself, I have a choice. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about, of I'm gonna go and I learned how to play a musical instrument. I was a music major. I took in culture. I decided to go this way. I became a writer and an editor. And, you know, and then you have my family over here that says sandwich and, you know, and things like that. And, you know, we do have those choices, but it doesn't come from the school. It comes from making a personal decision and enriching yourself.
That's who you are.
Right. I decided to enrich myself.
I think you would look good with big hair. Just, you know, I'm just thinking outside the box.
Oh no, we're not talking about that kind of white trash.
Anybody got any last minute things they want to say before we wrap it up?
You know, I wish I could have said this, but it's really detailed. You know, in our country, the beginning of testing was when the immigrants came here, and Stanford started the bell curve. And that was wrong from the beginning. And all this is emanated from a wrong that happened
Premise.
in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Premise.
because it was the 50 percentile, 34% are 1 standard deviation above 34 or below, then you got 14 and 2% on the high ends. In the middle, you got 75%, and then one standard deviation above, you got 90, and then one below, you got 60. That is the premise of the problem from the beginning, because it's all escalated from there.
You're right, because
Yeah.
back in the 70s, we graded on the curve.
Right.
That's what it was.
And
We
still,
graded on
most
the curve.
teachers do that today.
Do they still?
Yeah, it's based on comparison as opposed to, and again, see, I only have so much information on this. I don't have as much as you do. That's why I would like to see those New York results, because I'm only going by the small amount of information that I have. That's supposed to be performance-based, but.
Well, see, I taught, my field was aviation, and I taught it in high school and I taught it in college. And there were certain courses where I didn't grade on a curve, even though everything was being graded on a curve. I didn't. I said, you gotta have 96 to 100 to get an A. And I got called in on that. I go, we don't do that here. And I go, let me explain something to you. In this course, if you grade on a curve and they pass and they go out and kill an airplane full of people, that doesn't make sense, okay? It's like math. If you can't solve the problem, nobody can. You can't skew the bell curve all the way down and say, you got an A, you got one right. You either get it right or you don't.
Right, there has to be some absolutes.
Exactly. Well, anyway, it's been interesting. And we'll do this every week
Thanks.
except next week when Rick is going to be gone.
I'm going to abandon.
Thanks, Rickster.